since he has been suspended, I've had some interesting messages. My mum hasn't come out great from it. It's been interesting to say the least.
Subscribe now to the OTB Rugby podcast stream wherever you get your podcasts, or get the entire OTB catalogue on the OTB Sports app.
The OTB Podcast Network.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
All right, Anthony Moyes is with us this morning. Anthony, you've watched the game twice. How are you?
I'm good, gents. I'm good. Apologies. Battling the new Merrion Row traffic operation that's ongoing at the moment to make us all be very Mediterranean in our dining and staying outside and eating. So it's all go out there at the moment.
Well, look, you know, I mean, if it means you're a little bit late, I'm willing to take that. That's a sacrifice I'm willing to take for a bit of Mediterranean culture. Yeah,
as long as the hailstones like yesterday. I had the fire set at 5 o'clock yesterday, which is a new one. I sat down in front of the fire rewatching the Dublin Kerry game, kind of going, what is going on here? But yeah, great weekend of football, unbelievable weekend of football. Really, that's 2 weekends. We don't know what to do with ourselves.
Well, look, we put football in green in our performance rankings a little bit earlier on because football has been the winner. I see Colin O'Rourke saying maybe the year of ultra-defensive football is over. I mean, it's a little bit early. Who knows? Maybe Kerry go back to being a little bit more ultra-defensive when you concede 4 goals and they decide that, we threw the baby out with the bathwater. Where is the game generally before we get into the nitty-gritty of the matches at the weekend?
Yeah, I think it's in a great place, Chair, really, to be honest, because I think teams have just basically worked it out. You know, teams have obviously decided, and managements have decided that, you know, you can't go look, this ultra defensive thing. We all know teams set up defensive. You even saw it with Kerry Dublin. There was at times where there was obviously audible calls made, especially if you look at it right at the start of the second half. Kerry, as soon as the foul was committed and they had a Kerry man down, they just all decided 15 men behind the ball, and they frustrated Dublin for about 5 or 6 minutes, well, probably 4 or 5 minutes, and then Costello got a score, and then they did it again 2 or 3 different occasions during the game, and Dublin do it, and everyone does it. But you know, teams have just worked out that actually you can't stay defensive for too long, in the sense of you can't just have 2 men up front and then hope that we'll get up there and that we're able to compete and get scores. They've worked out that you need probably 15, 16 plus scores, and that you're not going to get that if you've got 12 men behind the ball and then trying to transition it. There's only a couple of teams who are really, really adept at doing that. Donegal are one because of their really strong running and the wrangles that they run it, which we spoke about last week. And then other teams are trying to change their style. You can see that in Tyrone. You know, very, very evident in Tyrone again, which we spoke about last week with the different size and shape. You can see it in Armagh. Armagh have gone for a very big physical team. A lot of big men around the pitch. A lot of fellas well able to win their own ball, be it high, low, out in front, whatever way it is. But they're also adept at moving the ball through the hands. So this whole thing of transitioning the ball from defence to attack and doing it as quickly as possible, which we see in soccer, and trying to outfox that kind of high press. That's making for really, really entertaining football, because of course what happens then is if the press is successful, you get turnovers and you get goal chances and opportunities, and then just the whole strategy of trying to see how can the goalkeeper get the ball out. You know, the goalkeeper is becoming more and more into play. Like, I mean, I remember a couple of years ago talking to Kieran McGeaney about this, and we were just saying that the day of the goalkeeper, the old traditional goalkeeper, just stand in goal and save shots and then kick the ball as far as you can, that's over now. The goalkeeper has to be a footballer. It has to be a person who's, like in soccer now, you know, well able to actually control the ball, pass short, pass long, nearly actually come out with the ball. And we're seeing that more in Gaelic football, but I think it's going to become more and more evident as the season goes. It
makes a lot of sense. It's another opportunity for you to add to give you a 2 versus 1 in various stages. That goalkeeper can be in any way a trustworthy distributor of the football and a skillful soloer and all that, close control and all that kind of stuff. One last thing on this, and the rules, obviously the advantage rule we saw again coming in for criticism the same way it has in the hurling. It seems completely ludicrous, and you would hope that lessons are being learned. But more important and more fundamentally than that, the mark was allegedly brought in to as a sop to traditionalists to prevent them going crazy because the game had become so defensive. We said at the time, that's just an evolutionary phase. All sport goes through these ultra-defensive periods where a defensive team comes and wins, and then everybody works their eyes off to try and beat it. And what has happened now is a new breed of coaches are playing much more aggressive, free-scoring football, but we still have the mark, which is actually completely counterproductive.
Yeah, 100%. I think in the Dublin or the Donegal Tyrone game, I think the first offensive mark was taken at about 68 minutes of the game. Mostly it's now if you catch. Okay, so if you get the right guy to catch a ball, i.e. a free taker type player, he'll probably mark it. But more often than not, it's a guy who maybe is catching the ball on his knees or catching a ball, sliding away from a bunch of fellas, or catching the ball with his back to goal and he's got players around him. And then really it's kind of like a cop out. If the kick is on and if a guy is open, you're going to take the kick. And you're going to try to execute the kick. But if the kick's not on, you're not just going to kick it up there just hoping that he's going to mark the ball. It adds absolutely nothing to the game, and it takes everything away from the game, slows it, stops it. And as you say quite rightly, Ger, it's the evolution. If you keep tinkering with rules every time a smart coach goes, you know what, I think I can set ourselves up a certain way that we can actually get an advantage on a team. If you then go, okay, tell you what I'm going to do now, I'm going to punish you for that, and we're going to just bring in a rule that prevents that. Like, whether it's easy on the eye or not, like if you're a defensive minded coach, the stuff that, let's say Jim McGuinness or whoever brought in 5 or 6 years ago, 7 years ago, 8 years ago now, you'd look at it and go, wow, that's really well set up. But if you're a progressive coach, you can go, you know what, I can have that, but I can also mix it with some offensive play, and how teams are trying to set up now. And you know what, it's going to happen in the next couple of years. Someone's going to work out, actually, do you know what we need to do? We need to do a massive full court press or some other evolution, which is trying to stop this transition. Or maybe teams will just say, listen, you have the ball, we'll sit back. And it makes for great tactical battles. And what it does is it evens out the pitch a lot for teams, and it gives teams the opportunity to stay in games. Like people who are kind of saying, it should be just more free flowing. Well, then we were seeing loads of one-sided games and teams getting absolutely hockeyed off the pitch. And like, who wants to see that? So I think stop tinkering with the rules, go back to basics. I'd love someone to actually do an analysis of the last 10 years, the rules that were brought in and how many have stayed and how many have really added to it. Even black cards, this penalty rule. I've probably made multiple mistakes because I actually don't even bother with the rules anymore. I'd say if I was managing a team, it'd be a nightmare because you're kind of going, I just get fed up. My head is spinning with it. They just keep bringing new things in. And like even the square ball rule, like we saw it at the weekend. I don't know what's a square ball and what's not a square ball anymore. So I wish they would just leave it alone, because let the coaches and let the teams themselves work out how best to play the game.
Anthony, looking at the game yesterday, then the Kerry-Dublin game, which I've watched twice at this stage, what was going on with Dublin in that second half that they looked all at sea? They looked completely lost. They couldn't get out of their own half for a period of time in that second half. A real rarity with this Dublin side.
Yeah, it's amazing, Nathan. I did watch it twice, and the reason I did was because I think it's a very, very important game for the evolution of both teams and for other teams of how to potentially dethrone Dublin. So there's a couple of caveats, I suppose. Dublin was a lot more experimental as regards the side to put out. Certainly the one that finished, and Kerry were a bit more settled, used to say. They did a lot more of their big guns out. But that second half period, what kind of amazed me was I think in the first half Kerry were a little bit passive. They were a bit standoffish. They were trying to do a bit of zonal marking. They were trying to kind of they had men back, but they were trying to kind of they were matching up, but at the same time they were trying to just pick space and then apply pressure on the ball as it came in around the middle. And bar a couple of defensive just kind of mishaps where they fell asleep for a couple of the goals, I think they were doing okay. They weren't bringing a massive amount of intensity at the far end of the pitch. So, you know, on Comerford's kickouts, they weren't really pushing up hard. And never mind the kickouts, but on the time when he actually got the ball out, because he was doing these small little dinks just outside the top of the D, and he was giving it to players. And what Kerry were doing, if you watch it, they were allowing the ball go out to the wings, and then they were corralling the men back in towards the centre. And as soon as the ball was passed into the centre, they then trapped them. They went in as hard as they could on them, and they tried to nail them. They got Mick Fitzsimons a couple of times. They got the new lad McMahon, I think, a couple of times. They got Fenton once or twice. So they started dispossessing, and they turned them over a good number of occasions and just stuck the ball over the bar. There was probably a goal or two there if they played the extra pass, but they were quite content to keep the scoreboard ticking over and then really press them. If you watch it, there's on the camera angle, there was some great kickouts where you see from behind the goal where they had 10 Kerry guys all squeezing up in the Dublin half. So they two across the front, right in front of the keeper. Then they had a block of 4. They had another block of 4, and then the 2 guys right in behind. So they were really squeezing them and saying, look, you know, if you want to go long, we're going to take you, and if you go short, you may get it out. But the second and third ball, we're going to put massive pressure on. So that was a big difference, Nathan. And Dublin probably didn't help themselves because they were a bit slow coming out. You didn't see that same kind of zip as you saw last week from the likes of McDade and Merchant, but also Kerry have to get a lot of credit because they put specific players on them who can match them for speed. So Moynihan was on McDade, and he matched them every time he went to kind of do that overlap run. He went with him and he put a lot of pressure on him. So Dublin really didn't have many out balls, and it's funny. I've never seen it, well, I haven't seen it in a long time, but if you watch the game back, there's about probably 15-20 minutes into the second half, and a ball goes up to Conor Callaghan, and it's a terrible ball. It's a left-footed pass by Davy Byrne. He just kind of sticks it up in the air, and the Kerry lads win it. And O'Callaghan comes down, and you can see him. He shouts back at Davy Byrne as if to say, like, what are you doing, lads? Because they kicked in about 3 or 4 terrible balls into the full forward line, just under pressure, you know. So Kerry lads were with them, were beside them. Again, we're just applying a bit of pressure on the ball going in. Whereas the first half I wouldn't really like. I mean, the first half was a bit more of a challenge game from both sides. It was very loose, you know, nice passing, easy scores. But Kerry in that second half really showed, I think, a way to put pressure on, and obviously they said, listen, we're going to play this game from the front foot, and we're going to just really try to hold the ball in the Dublin kind of defence as much as possible.
If you're Kerry, you're fairly confident that the defensive lapses which caused the 4 goals and some of the other goal scoring opportunities are easier fixed than it would be to suddenly magic up a score of 118 against the Dubs. So they've got the hardest part fixed. They need to work on the defensive lapses and make sure that Paul Murphy isn't left one-on-one with Conor Callaghan for long balls in future, that there's some kind of better defensive cooperation and communication going on. And also how Dublin scored their goals. It's on tape now. You go back and you watch it again and again and again and again, and you see the movement and the hand passing in the corner forward spot that's causing that difficulty, and work out some way of stopping it.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, it's a very simple backdoor cut that Dublin have been doing for forever and a day now, it seems. You know, where they come down one side of the pitch, quite often it's the left side of the pitch. And what happens is a man comes running towards you, then he puts the brakes on, he cuts in behind, and the ball is popped over the top. Now, sometimes it's really obvious, but this one was exactly the same. Con just took one little step, then turned, gone. And what has to happen there, you know, and look, the ideal way to defend that is someone coming from the middle, from the central area. And if you watch that goal back, Paul Murphy actually is coming back beside Spillane. Spillane points to him to go back into the centre of the pitch. And he sees the danger, and he kind of makes a bit of a step, but he doesn't go hard enough. If he sprints, he actually makes it, because by the time O'Callaghan does the dummy and then the bounce, he would have been there right in his foot, because he actually ends up quite close to him. And if he had just put the pace on a little bit, so that's going to be picked out. You know, Gavin Crowley at 6, you need to be at 6 especially with Dublin, you need to be syncing with the ball. So as the ball drops in behind you, there's no point standing out and marking a guy who's at the top of the D if the ball has gone into the full forward line, whether it's left or right. You have to sync with the ball. So the defender should be dropping back in a situation where they can see the ball, out of both sides of it. So out to the right side or out to their left side. It's not behind them. They don't have to turn their body around. So what happens there is it forces the forwards back out. And you know what? If it goes back out, we put pressure on them there. And if they kick a score, they kick a score. But we haven't conceded a goal. We haven't conceded a 3 rather than a 1. So that's something that they can work on. And you know what, Jerry? If they get it right, with what they have up the other end, and also the mobility that they're getting around the middle. Some of those young lads, O'Connor and stuff, who came in around the middle of the field were absolutely brilliant. I just thought they really took the challenge on, those guys. And, David Moran is a fantastic player and has been an unbelievable servant for Kerry. But I'd say you'll see himself maybe more of a guy who'll come into a game to try and control a game after that first 35, 40 minutes of the helter-skelter, because you need the mobility. You need the mobility, especially with the new Dublin lads. You need the mobility around that central area, and they're finding them. So, it was a fantastic game. On the Dublin side, people were raving about Con. I thought Con had an okay game. I didn't think he was absolutely brilliant. He took his goals well, but outside of that, and even the goal with Murphy, it was a terrible old ball in. It was just a punt in, and it was more of a Kerry mess up than really him doing anything massively good. He's strong, he's all that, and he's well able to get the ball. But I thought Kilkenny had and I thought Costello again. After last week, he got some really, really good scores, and of anyone, he got some very important points when Dublin were really struggling in that second half.
One last point on the Dubs. So John Small was taken off injured, and afterwards Mick Galvin was saying that it doesn't look good and they're away for the scan, obviously. But the notion that the Dubs are as festooned with strength and depth as they have been traditionally, it's just not true anymore, because those players who were all-time great players in their late 20s and early 30s are some of them now in their mid-30s, and it's just not the same. Like, time is undefeated, except in Tom Brady's case, but like literally that's one in a 6 billion. These players will not be as good as they were. Some of them will come off their absolute peak, and whether or not the replacement level players are at All-Ireland winning level has still to be decided in some instances. So I don't know, it felt like it was a big moment for Kerry yesterday, where you've got Moynihan, Spillane and O'Connor. That's 3 new, ultimately first teamers, it looks like, who can go toe-to-toe with Dublin, who have the pace and the strength and the ball carrying and the threat in whatever area of the field they're in. Whereas with the Dubs, it's like, are they actually better than the team who won the 5th and 6th All-Ireland? I'm not sure.
Yeah. You throw Gavin White in. I thought he was absolutely phenomenal yesterday. If I'm Dessie Farrell now, I'm really worried this morning, because John Small being missing for me with a bad hamstring. It's one of those you can see that he was holding the kind of top of his leg. He was in full good flow, trying to sprint away from fellas and solar the ball. That could be 6-8 weeks, could be 12 weeks. That's probably him gone. And I tell you one thing, they lose Ger as well. When they lose him, they lose the enforcer. They lose a guy who's in that defence, who's at the central area of that defence. And what Dublin do an awful lot in their defence is they'll match up, and what they'll do is they'll end up creating a situation where he's free and maybe another defender is free, or a half forward, and they'll have basically everyone matched up, and they'll have 2 extra defenders kind of sitting around the sides of the D, and anything that comes in or anything that's loose, or if a defender gets a ball flicked, or if a guy's coming at an angle, they're the guys that engage. So they're the extra 2 guys, and then he has an unbelievable ability to drive up the pitch. He's got great strength, but above all of that, for me, what he is he's an enforcer in the central area. You don't mess with him. If you're going to go toe-to-toe with him, you're going to get it back. And that's fair enough. That's what you need back there. And above them all, I don't think McDade's that. I think McDade's a lovely footballer, but I don't think he's that type. I don't think Merchant's that type. I don't think Davy Byrne's that type. Fitzsimons isn't that type. So now 4 out of your 6 defenders who, if I'm a forward, I'm going, you know what, maybe I can bully them. Maybe I can go in here and throw my weight around. And if I'm an opposition player now, they'll probably have to bring McCarthy back into that 6 role.
Yeah.
Now, James won't let you mess with him, that's for sure. But at the same time, you're all of a sudden starting to lose those guys. And when they bring Philly in yesterday to replace John Small, you're kind of saying, well, who else is on the bench there? Who else can come in? Like, if they lost another man in the defence, now you're really robbing Peter to pay Paul. So I think you're right. I think the strength that's there, or the depth that has been there over the last number of years with Keane O'Sullivan, with those guys. I know Keane's trying to get back and he's working hard to get back in. And if they could get him back fit and flying, he would be an ideal, obviously, foil for that position. But it's as I said, if I'm Dessie Farrell this morning, I'm probably checking that scan as much as I can and making sure that it's not too bad.
One last question from me. Tyrone, obviously, again, a new management team who've come in and look like they're committed to a more attacking style of play. We've seen Darragh Canavan and Mark Bradley come in, and look, obviously Canavan comes with this huge reputation. Donaghy's there as well. It's like a new, and obviously they've got the Twin Towers, who we think will be in the full forward line when the championship kicks off. What do you think of them? Where are they at the moment? What's the truth about this Tyrone side right now?
They're good. There's no doubt about that. They're better than they have been in the last number of years, because I think they have concentrated again. To go back to the very start of our conversation, they know they can do the blanket, as good as anyone. Okay, so they did that for a number of years, but they also realised that many times when they came up to Croke Park to play Dublin, they got nowhere near them. So they said, right, we need to unearth guys who can not only kick scores, but we now need to unearth big physical fellas who are able to take men on, who are able to win their own ball, be it dirty or clean, kick scores, and cause a massive physical presence if we want to do that high press. So you see the goal that Petey Hart got, that's from physical power. Goalkeepers looking out, he's seeing big men around, they're squeezed up and they're battling for every ball. And then they obviously have the skill when they get the ball. They've got nice players around like Bradley and Canavan and these guys who can add that little bit of extra. But a lot of it now, I think, is going to be based on the size and the power. And they came up against a big, powerful team in Armagh, so they're probably happy in themselves that they're saying, well, look, the week before we could do it with a bit of finesse, and we did it with a bit of running, whereas this week we came up against a big team. And that Armagh team, by the way, Ger, are going places. They've got some really good players. The 2 O'Neill lads, they remind me of the McEntee lads back in the day. I know that's high accolades because those 2 boys were serious operators, but they're big, they're physical, but they also have some lovely touches. The ball in for the goal, I don't know if you saw it, but the no-look pass where Rian O'Neill just clipped it into the full forward was absolutely beautiful over the weekend. But Tyrone will be thereabouts, absolutely. They're progressing. That was a big win for them, especially in the last quarter where they just pulled away from Armagh. I thought they were lucky enough. I thought if Armagh had got the penalty, that would have put them under a bit of pressure. And of course, they go down the far end and they get the goal. So that was the real kind of turning point in the game. But again, it's great to see them, really embracing this whole transition and trying to say, you know what, we need to get more scores. I still think they need, I know we always say this, but they need that one really unbelievable scoring full forward. And if McShane can do that, great. But the a la Stephen O'Neill, the guy who can just kick points from anywhere. Now McCurry came on and was brilliant. Sometimes he blows hot and cold. So it'd be great to see him getting a good run and, kind of really continue that threat that he has.
It's coming nicely to the boil at this stage. Anthony, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
Cheers, lads. No bother.
Anthony Moyle's given us his thoughts there this morning. We didn't get into Mayo. I'm surprised the Mayo hype machine hasn't rolled on anywhere just yet.
Division 2 football, sure. When you're in Division 2, you can't be thinking about contending for All Ireland's, can you?
Has there ever been a year where Mayo haven't thought about contending for All Ireland's?
Listen, if Galway want to go and implode and Roscommon don't have any interest, and Mayo need to go and save Connacht football yet again, I guess they'll just have to go and do that. It's incredible how Division 2, you're very much out of sight, out of mind. They've got 2 wins out of 2, though. They're going to be in the semi-finals. All they want is promotion. There's never been a better year, I don't think, to be in Division 2. Mayo got a good draw on Connacht. They can sort of ease themselves in, give some new players a bit of game time without any great pressure of battling for survival or anything like that in games that they should be winning. The next weekend will be interesting as to whether they go all out or decide actually to rest up a few players for the semi-finals. And because again, we're seeing the hamstring injuries, we're seeing the injuries that are coming up. So I think it gives them a chance. Actually, they've a nice run of fixtures between the league and into Connacht, the way it's set up for them. So maybe momentum will come.
So you're predicting Sam for Mayo. What's the weird harbinger of this year that hasn't happened since so far? Phil Mickelson?
Well, Phil Mickelson at nearly 51. And, well, I don't know if you know what happened in 1951, Ger.
Perfect. His 51st year. That's what we'll go with.
Exactly.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters. That was an OTB Podcast Network presentation.